What makes a game a labor of love? Is it the amount of time spent working on it before and after release? Or is it the features that are crammed in? Or the popularity from continued supports? Or could it be some feeling that is indescribable, something that you can only point out from experience?
Whatever it is, Project Zomboid qualifies, despite what the Steam Awards say. It's an open-world survival game that stood the test of time. It has to be experienced to believe how good it is. But was it always as good as everybody says it is? Can I really trust that guy on YouTube who says this game has changed his life? Probably not. Did the ideas brought up remain intact throughout the years? And what happened to those NPCs everybody keeps talking about? Come with me to relive the past, to learn about the history of Project Zomboid through some of its older versions. I put all the links to the versions down in the description. I didn't get any viruses from them, but I would still beware on whatever version you download, especially if it's a torrent. Project Zomboid didn't start as a zombie game, or a game for that matter, but 3 separate equally shitty games. Back when they had their first blow up from Reddit, the Indie Stone, which consists of
Andy Hodgetts or Captain Binky.
Okay, I'm Marina Sue Chung, also known as Mashed Potato.
Chris Simpson or Lemmy.
I'm Will Porter.
began taking donations through PayPal. But if you don't have a product, that's considered fraud by them, so of course they just froze their account. To curb this rule, the Indie Stone did a really cool thing called lying, and they put out these 3 shit games. I tried finding them, but there's just really no record of them except for these 3 screenshots from this video where I pulled most of the information from. And then after that there's 2 versions, which are also lost to time, but now we are finally on the pre-alpha stages, in which there are 3 different versions that we can play today. The first one is 0.1.2a. Ha! Suck it, Private Lime. There's an older version, so that means you're gonna have to delete your video. Shit. I mean, if you don't move, it's still playable, but if you consider playing the game to be playing the game, then you can't play. 0.1.4c is the first official place. The story of Bob and Kate. This game's 12-year-long span starts at a linear story with branching paths and not the open-world zombie game that we know today.
Also, I forgot to say, after you're done with the story, you could just play the open world by itself. So it's a story and an open world. I just didn't say that.
You might say that the modern Project Zomboid kind of strays away from the formula, but I argue that it actually enhances it, rather expands it into multiple different stories instead of one different story, and gets closer and closer to their ever-burgeoning goal of what they want to do with this game. In terms of gameplay, 0.1.4c is simple, effective, but a little bit basic, to be honest. The writing of Will Porter is engaging, like the story hooks were fully indie by the end, which is pretty impressive considering it's just really just text on screen. The branching choices also gives it some replayability, but if you really want to replay it, you have to play out all the little stuff, so like finding food and all that. There's no skip button, which is really annoying if you want to get every single possible outcome for a video. Hour and a half of footage, I'm only going to use 2 seconds. I enjoyed the little tale that was told, although I felt like there could have been more to it. Like when I killed the bandit, kind of felt like there was a bug, like it should have been more, and it turns out there was planned to be more, but because of reasons that I'll get to later, they had to cut the entire story and couldn't actually expand it. But for what this version does, it does it pretty well. One thing that can be easily distinguished from every other zombie game around this time is the music. Zach Beever, who Will Porter describes as a musical prodigy, composed all the music for the game around this time. And let's just take a listen to it.
You come here on an...
It's kind of insane how good these pieces are, especially the early pieces that don't show up in the modern Project Zomboid. For example, the menu music, which everybody knows and loves. That free sound library chanting, it gives more of like a raw emotion type vibe. Like it's more of like the sorrow and the pain that comes with a zombie apocalypse, as well as the hurt, the confusion, the intensity, all rolled into one. The chanting also helps give the game more of an elevated feel from all the amazing other types of music that are in the game and that are in other zombie games. And the soundtrack has only gotten better once Indie Stone finally integrates and blends the music into gameplay. When first playing the older versions, I was surprised about how many details still carry over to today. Like the weapons, the music, the textures, they're all almost about the same as today, if not a little bit updated in the future. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. All this art and all this music is excellent, and I'm glad that they kept it in. Mash's and Captain Binky's art is stellar, which is a good segue to talk about how the game looks. Other than the linear story, the art is the only other radical departure from today's version. It's got kind of like a retro cartoonist look. I really enjoy it, to be honest, but paired with the animations, or more accurately the lack of animations, it feels a little bit stunted, a little bit jittery, a little bit rigid. Keep in mind this is still the pre-alpha version, and they had to build the engine from the ground up without exactly knowing what 3D isometric games were like.
Speaking of art, I tried to find interviews with the Indie Stone they did back then, and I found one of the best, worst interviews that included talking about if Project Zomboid was art.
So, first question.
Right.
Would you consider Project Zomboid to be art? Ooh.
No.
No.
No, I wouldn't.
Nice definitive answer. Why not? If it's not art, do you think it has any special themes or points that you think people should notice or bring up? Have you played or seen a game that could be art?
Like, it's genuinely hard to watch this interview at points. Like, no disrespect to the guy, but he's just not cut it as an interviewer.
I guess coffee is always help.
Yeah, that's kind of an essential ingredient.
Yeah, a lot of people like coffee. What coffee do you drink?
And this is kind of the running trend of interviews with the Indie Stone. They have some of the most weirdest interviews ever. Like this one from 2014, where this lady just straight up dissociates every time she asks a question. Or this one from 2015, where the guy has no fucking clue what Project Zomboid is.
I'm here with Andy at Project Zomboid.
Crafting and farming and cooking, lots of long-term survival strategies.
Yeah. Right, so I take it from that then once you die, that's like that run over and then you start again, or? Alright, so I take it, does that mean you've got to really like scavenge as well for like things to defend yourself with? So can you kill other people? That's good. And can you build your defenses as well? So like can you make like doors or...
And I wish these guys had more than one or two good interviews back then. I'm glad they took it upon themselves to explain their history in that Rezzed video that I keep alluding to. If you haven't checked out that video yet, it's great at explaining their early history. Speaking of history, why are 0.1.2 and 0.1.4 still even available online? Back when they first started, they didn't really have a major distributor to distribute the game, so they just did everything themselves. And because of this, and their attitude in general towards piracy, they didn't really want to invest in advanced DRM. So when the time came around for a new version, they added an auto update button, which didn't go through any security measures and just downloaded straight from the server they were renting. Now, if you give the pirators an infinitely updating game, they're just gonna do that. After a while, the people at Indie Stone realized that they were losing a lot of money and that they had to pay a lot more in server costs. So they had to temporarily pull the plug on the game. And to curb any hatred from actually doing that, they put out 0.1.4c as a free public tech demo. Straight up legends, like that's just cool. Oh, and 0.1.2a, I found on Reddit that some guy posted a small note about the privacy problem. It got so bad that Notch, famous creator of Minecraft, decided to tweet about it. This is another moment that I want to touch on. Zomboid's history is cool to talk about because it has some really weird connections to famous people. Like in 2014 when it had a YouTube resurgence, there were some famous people that played it, like Node, sister channel to fucking Corridor Digital.
My beans are in there! Get out of this house! Dude, what's the time? I'm grabbing my beans. What's the time of the beans?
Mr. Beast!
What's up guys, and welcome to my Project Zomboid Let's Play.
Your boy Jacob Edwards. Mr. Beast wasn't big back then, but still, it's just kind of cool that he still has videos up on his channel to this day. Although 0.1.4c is really just one linear storyline, you can really see where things were going, especially with the ragtag group of people and how passionate and how much they loved this idea. I mean, if it were bad and these people were shitty, we wouldn't be talking about it today. The ideas were there for the time, it just needed a little bit more refining. version 0.1.5D, which again was bravely posted by some guy on Reddit and given the stamp of approval by Lemmy. So up until now, the Indie Stone had still been doing everything themselves. PayPal and now Google were simultaneously freezing their accounts and unfreezing their accounts. However, Dejura, which was an obscure indie game platform, decided to take up distribution on their own end. So now, finally, away from all that junk of distribution and sales marketing and all that, they could just focus on the game entirely. Now, the story mode has two options. Mainline story finally was given a name, Till Death Us Do Part, and the blank canvas, which has a weird tag attached to it, made by Ringo D123. Looking him up on YouTube, it appeared he was a fan at the time, and he just got noticed by the Indie Stone and got hired on to code and write for them. And it still looks like he's employed by them somewhat today, based off his activity on the forums. The Indie Stone, throughout their history, have done cool things like this, where they have fans that are originally passionate for the game and make mods or videos, and they just end up hiring them so they can work on a bigger canvas. One of the big standout features from this version is the sandbox mode. We first see the familiar, but kind of primitive for this time, character creation screen. There's a slim selection of professions and traits, and not really much else. Like, you can't just make your character, you can't give him clothes or anything like that. You just make it. Also, a cool little feature I like is that if you pick the construction worker, the guy takes off his shirt, which is cool. Also, there's no females. No females can play this game at this time, so if you're female looking to play this game, sorry, you can't. It's only for us boys. Can I break out of the shirt? Nope. It also introduces the fancy forename and surname. Oh, so fancy rather than first name and last name. When loading in, the second iconic staple comes into the fold.
These are the end times. There is no hope of survival. I pooed in my trousers a little. This is how you died. It also shows up in the earlier versions. I just accidentally skipped past it and then wrote this into the script and then actually did fact checking and realized that was wrong.
Simple, effective, to the point, and acts like a pseudo-introduction to the world. This is not a game about how you single-handedly defeated a zombie apocalypse. It's about how your story starts and ends with death. It's genius. And also the introduction of the how into the sentence adds a more open-ended feel to your story. You can have it be as long or as little as you want. The map itself is quaint. It's a smaller section of Moldra that they would later expand on in future versions, but there's not really much of note, other than maybe the tall building, the jukebox building, the burn building, and Bob and Kate's house. Again, not really much there. Scattered around these houses are various items, and it becomes apparent that there's not a lot of variety. There's enough items to make the world feel real, but there's so little items that you'll end up using the same exact thing over and over again. Also around the map are the zombies. They're pretty easy to kill and in turn can hit you instantly. If you walk past them just a little bit too close, they will bite you. And also they're unlootable and very slow, but if you're not paying attention, they will corner you very easily.
Oh, what the fuck?
Is that an NPC? The famously flawed NPCs that everybody really wants back in the game and decided to mod it so that they can get them back in the game based off of this version, but they're really not that great, to be honest. They're more akin to zombies than actual humans. They'll just kill anything they can find and die really, really quickly. And also, you can't really interact with them. And if you try to, especially near a zombie, they can just one-hit you back to the start screen. It was clear even back then that they really did need an overhaul. But that would have to wait until the incident. In terms of change, 0.1.5C D. Why the fuck did they have this stupid naming scheme? God damn, they're like Sony out here. Fuck. This version is really like the previous version, but with NPCs and it's the sandbox mode. Up until the Indie Stone had been on the fast track becoming media darlings like Minecraft. Their magnum opus idea and the execution of that idea cemented them in the goodwill of others. The team was extremely active on the forums during this time, and throughout their history, frankly. And even back then, they brought forth modding tools for people to go wild with. However, then the incident occurs. During October 16th, 2011, Lemmy and Binky's house was tragically broken into, and their laptops, as well as their work and Lemmy's credit card, but that doesn't matter, was stolen. I mean, that's a lot of work gone, but at least they have a cloud backup and they can easily just bounce back pretty... Oh. They don't have a backup? Shit. Now, obviously angry and depressed, Lemmy made some choice tweets at the time and decided to contact Will Porter, who then put out a press release. This statement is so fresh, even Binky and MASH didn't even know what was going on. Luckily, as the statement says, no personal data was lost, except for Lemmy's credit card, but that's just not important. So only the game and its almost complete update was lost. So, predictably, people were angry. Reddit, which was once the most fervent supporter of the game and even gave it its first initial boost, is now a mob of angry people. So mad that I decided to call them frauds. Whatever, people suck. And of course, it didn't help when Binky found out and he decided to also make some very hateful messages against the hate messages that were coming out. Now, from today's enlightened perspective, it's obviously these guys weren't really at fault. Sure, they did an irresponsible thing by not backing up their game for 2 months to the cloud, but do you really expect to be robbed the moment you move into a new house? Especially after your old house had a fucking bomb maker's bomb go off. But biting back at the people who have only helped them up to this point didn't really help their case that much. The damage done, the golden status of the Indie Stone, was cast aside for a darker timeline of slower updates and Thursdoids. No. The situation is kind of like the Hello Games dilemma with No Man's Sky, but Project Zomboid was already good at the time, and dare I say, was better on release. So all they really had to do is to release a new version. And in March 2012, the 0.2.0 family thing version history was released, ranging from A to Q, even all the way up to the new RC tags, which stands for Release Candidate, which is kind of like the precursor to the Builds tag. We are officially in the alpha stages of Project Zomboid now. There are multiple versions in the 0.2.0 family that have been archived and shared to the public, but I would like to look at specifically 0.2.0 RC 2.5. One thing becomes clear, there's only the sandbox mode, which confused me because the story mode and NPCs are supposed to be there. They're supposed to be removed in 2013, not 2012. I'm just gonna chalk it up to the version I have because I didn't realize it at the time, but it's a little bit broken. Regardless, there's only one thing I can do, so is the alpha version different from the pre-alpha versions? Well, in some cases, like the things you do or the textures, no. But in most cases, yes.
Staples like building and other Moodles were added, actually being able to save games, and
the animations were finally updated to have more than 4 frames. But I want you to look at this character's animation and see if you notice something. Did you notice it? It may not be that apparent, but I put a little bit of a Goku, but it's more of a feeling that something is wrong. Then it hit me. It kind of looks like this guy's ice skating a little bit on the ground. Like he is not cohesive with the world. And it's kind of the same for the NPCs and the zombies. They don't feel like they're part of the world. It feels like they're just kind of running on top of a matte painting. Or I could be bugging hardcore. I was high when I wrote the script. So speaking of NPCs, you can see where, despite the patch notes saying that there was an overhaul for them, they started to fall apart. They added this odd, happy, mellow, and mad bar for interacting with NPCs. And theoretically, if you click one, you can interact with them and they'll have different dialogue options. And even if you're happy, they'll become one of your followers. And I was successful in actually doing that, which I was very surprised about. But very quickly, almost in like 3 seconds after killing our first zombie, he decided to become the group leader and lead his own expedition, in which I had to follow him around. And then I watched him directly run into a group of zombies and immediately die. Like whenever I tried to speak to him or like tell him to follow me or to stay put, he would just not. It's very clear that the AI for these NPCs are very broken. In this version, they added a new border forest and a bigger expansion of Moldra as a whole. Now, I can recognize these are merely set dressing, but I actually quite like them. The forest had kind of like a backrooms type scenario. Like every time I hit a load screen, I just got more and more forest and I couldn't get out. And I realized one of the reasons why it felt really creepy is because There's no music. Halfway through the RC versions, they had to cut the music for some odd reason. I only found this out after reading an interview from Zach Beever. Now, if you gotten this far in this video, dear viewer, you may have noticed that I haven't said subscribe. And also, I haven't really been talking about the combat. That was on purpose, because I wanted to wait until this version, history, thing, whatever you call it, to talk about it. Because of one particular build. One build that stands above the rest, because it's named without any dots or numbers or RCs or RRCs or anything like that. And when I desperately tried to find, but just couldn't, the experimental combat build. In the pre-alpha versions, melee killing a zombie was a breeze, depending on if you actually could connect with the zombie. And guns... they were just straight up overpowered as long as you had enough ammo. Now, these aren't a bad thing per se. People like the power fantasy of being able to kill swaths of enemies. It's the reason why Skyrim and the Fallout series is as popular as it is.
So, on March 30th, 2012, the experimental combat build was released to shake up the combat feel, and they stated why they wanted to shake it up in a forum post. In this post, Captain Binky outlines two major factors that have made the combat in previous builds feel the way it is. There are two main problems which are both related to each other. It's easy to dispatch a horde with a melee weapon, and NPCs serve no useful purpose other than to consume resources. The result of this is that people tend to immediately slaughter any NPC that they find because there is no reason to do so otherwise. We've all seen the screenshots of Baldspot stood alone in a street, with the bodies of hundreds of zombies scattered around him. This is entirely counter to the realistic zombie apocalypse. The only way that such carnage should be possible is in a team. If having help taking out a larger horde was the only way of standing a chance, then the food ration they require becomes a justifiable expense. The philosophy of what the Annystone wanted the game to feel like comes in a personal anecdote that Binky outlines in a hidden section. I would like to cite... I can't do a British accent. I would like to cite a game which is rather tangentially related, but which I would regard as an inspiration to the sort of thing which should be happening on a typical head-to-the-supermarket-for-supplies mission. F-19 Stealth Fighter, and its sequel, F-117A Stealth Fighter. This is a very special flight sim. Your missions involve photographing or occasionally bombing a target, and to do so you need to fly low, and weave your way through enemy radars at exactly the correct trajectory as to not alert defenses. Nothing technically happens at all in the perfect mission, yet this is one of the tensest, most dramatic games I've ever played. This is what the zombie apocalypse should be like. Right now, as the game stands, there is no, or very little, threat at all.
I tried playing F-19 Stealth Fighter and its sequel to show this difference, but I couldn't really figure out how to play them. Maybe I'm just too old or just too young or not patient enough to look up manuals of how to play the game. Then allow me to hijack Binky's example with one of my own, the Metal Gear Solid series. More specifically, if you play the pure stealth builds. Needing to do something or retrieve something for a mission is just as he says. It's more of just a walk through the park where nothing on the surface appears to happen. But having to make careful decisions not to box yourself in, or evading the traps sent by the NPCs is one of the tensest, most gratifying experiences when you actually get through it. The tension is palpable during these sections, and it's the reason why I like the Metal Gear Solid series. And getting spotted by the vastly bigger enemy forces is detrimental, which makes the threat more, threatening. Regardless of the game or the example, the idea of evading rather than going head-on is a uniquely interesting concept that I don't see many games actually do. So did they achieve this balance that was sought out in these versions? Well, like I said, I don't really have that particular version, but 0.2.R, whatever it's called, I'm pretty sure it has all the changes that they have in that version. So, does it work? First off, they cite melee combat as the thing that they wanted to change the most, because the wildly swinging adds too much to being able to kill everybody. And to their credit, they actually do change that, with having to hold down the mouse rather than tapping away. The melee combat was already kind of wonky because you have to hit the right angle of attack in order to kill something. So they just kind of ruin combat further. And NPCs die immediately right off the bat anyways, so there's no reason to keep them around. Botting AI is too good too, so there's no such thing as stealth in these early builds. And the shotgun and the pistol are still overpowered. As long as you have enough ammo, you're virtually untouchable. Now, this can be curbed with ammo control, like the Deus Ex Human Revolution does. The developers can intentionally limit how much ammo spawns in the world. Guns can still be overpowered, but they are relegated to last stand type situations. At least in my experience, I could still find a gun really easily and enough ammo to wreck shop. Like, of course, I'll run out of ammo eventually, but I'll leave behind 300 zombie corpses, which are completely counter to what the idea is trying to get across. So all in all, I don't think they really succeed in their goal. NPCs are broken, melee combat kind of sucks now again, and weapons are overpowered whichever way you slice it. The idea, like communism, has some merits, but the execution, like communism, doesn't really work. The moment NPCs were removed from the game, I think this idea died as a whole. And that's also not to say that it's bad that they abandoned this idea.
I think they do, in current day Project Zomboid, actually pull off this idea in a more interesting way that deserves its own video.
I found that forum post interesting and I felt like I needed to share my ideas and perspective on it. But that is, in essence, 0.2.0R RC 2.5. A strange stepping stone in Zomboid lore, with some cool concepts that really just needed to crystallize further. Now, Project Zomboid had been seeing some moderate success up until this point, and even gained a good following of people. So naturally, the next step is to go to a bigger platform to hit the largest number of people, Steam. But in the meantime, before the Steam releases, I have one more version to get to. The 2.9 family in 2013 were the first real snapshot of modern Project Zomboid that we know and love. Even though Bob and Kate and NPCs are officially gone now, we get the first iconic thing, a picture of Bob and Kate on the menu screen. In it, it finally details the end of their story. Bob becomes a zombie and eats Kate. I guess it's a fitting enough end. In the bottom left is an actual in-game options menu. Also present in the start menu is the survival and sandbox game mode. Clicking on the survival or sandbox game mode will eventually lead to the map selection, in which there's only one, if you don't have any mods, Muldra, and is touted as the final full map. The sandbox finally has the sandbox menu. It's a smaller selection, but it's just enough. The character creation and selection screen is largely the same, plus now you can finally play as girls. Girls are allowed in. Getting into the game proper, the first iteration motif keeps coming. The houses and textures look identical to the current version. And we finally get this vastly superior drag and drop menu rather than some stupid list you have to scroll through. Zombies and the player are now cohesive in the world and feel like they're actually running and stomping around. The melee combat is still wonky, even more so in this version than the previous one. Zombies, when they get pushed back, are like they have the biggest knockback percentage in the world. Speaking of the animations, I enjoy the love-making it takes to actually open a window finally. And when you die, the game just quits, which is the coldest thing ever. It's just like the Project Zomboid team is calling you stupid. Like they're like, get out of our game, idiot. Not really much else to 2.9.7. This build is honestly just like playing Project Zomboid, but you're only relegated to Muldra. Now, beyond 2.9.7 is the Steam releases, and this is where we stop for today. So, after getting to know the alpha/pre-alpha versions of the game, what's the point? Why should we know all this information? From a purely technical standpoint, seeing how a game evolves over time and being able to play those versions is important for developers and gamers and artists alike. And it's also generally just cool to see how a game evolves over time and the ability to actually play those versions. However, I feel like there's a deeper, more corny lesson that I can gather. Allow me to share one more clip.
Next up, remember the game isn't just you, because we really want to mention, since this began, there's a lot of people that could have become part of the thing with us. We don't want to say this thing as a kind of a, oh wow, look what we got. We just want to say this happened in a year, and bloody hell, that's just mental. The final thing I want to talk about is modding and the players being our future, because the stuff that already on the forums is just quite remarkable.
Coming from a modern background ourselves, we knew how important modding can be to a community and to a game, to increase its life and to give the community more involvement with the game.
Yeah, I mean, we're such a tiny team. There's only so many of us, and we've got this mad list of things to get through, and we can only do it in one at a time in a certain order. And the great thing for us is the fact that, like say with the farming or the reloading stuff,
or making a cow.
Yeah, you know, someone can look at this list of things we want to do and say, well, I'm not prepared to wait however long it takes them to get around to doing this, I'm going to do it myself. And that's the beauty of having these tools in there now.
Cool.
So,
while they're really just talking about the modding community, thanking those that have helped them along the way, I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. The history of Project Zomboid, especially this early history that I've described today, is marred with passion. Passion enough to quit your job and to roll the dice on an idea. Passion enough to realize the gaming industry is fucked and go against that current. Passion enough to keep going when the going gets tough. Passionate enough to keep with a project for 12 years and continue to update it in new and innovative ways. And, whenever possible, foster that passion, not hinder it with lawsuits and disapprovals and cease and desists and other shitty things companies do. And a community that just wants to attach itself to the game. That's what they're doing in this clip. They're thanking and ratifying the people. Hell, Indies don't go above and beyond for its people. Dedicating modded tools, easy access to the files, easy access to mod, responding to people on the forums, responding to critics with their own justification, relenting when they're wrong, all with happiness, kindness, patience, and above all else, passion. That loss and the hatred that spawned from 2011 seems small in comparison to today because of how many hearts of people they've actually won over that continue to play this game to this day. Thank you, Indie Stone. Hello, hi. Thank you for sticking around. If you like this video, subscribe. I had planned to do a longer portion about the Steam releases, but I had to re-record this because all the footage was blurry, because it was all out of focus. Maybe I'll do a longer video about it at a later date. But anyways, I go now. Bye-bye.